Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. There were today we're going to talk about the psychological level of the narcissistic paradigm. But before that, I want to refer to a couple of things that people said last week that I think are really, really important additions and amplifications of what I was talking about. One of the things that was said was that while we may be living in the predominant narcissistic paradigm, there are an awful lot of progressive things, such as the civil rights movement or the women's movement and the gay movement and the ecological movement that have been happening, and that it's really important to honor and notice those. And so I'm very, very glad that that got pointed out. And it's in the nature of paradigms that the new paradigm is in the constant process of being born within the dominance of the, and in contradiction to, in response to the existing paradigm. So that process of birth is constant and intrinsic in a paradigm. So a paradigm is a clumsy generalization, overgeneralization of our reality. So to talk about that paradigm is either useful or unuseful, depending on whether it reveals more than it ignores. So my interest in presenting it is that it is a way of seeing how the different levels of our lives are affected, and to see the unity, to see how in some way this is all part of one thing, because that helps us to understand how healing and working on any part of it is part of the transition that has to eventually happen on all of those levels. There was something else that was said last time, and that was one main thing. Okay, so today I want to talk about what in my system. Okay, so to summarize, I'm saying that we need to make a transition from the paradigm of narcissism to a paradigm of communion, which means a transition from the notion that the world is best understood and explained as a battle and competition between incompatible interests and parts on the narcissistic side, to on the communion side, understanding that the connectedness and interdependence of everything, and the dependence of everything that exists on that network of interdependencies and mutual dependencies. And then I'm saying that the narcissistic paradigm is mapped, can be mapped as a series of concentric circles, and in which each circle describes a particular sphere. And the way I'm organizing it is starting from the inside, which is on the intrapersonal aspect, and then moving out to the interpersonal, and it moves out to every aspect that includes relationships between species, between races, between nations, our economic relationships, our other social relationships, our understanding of nature and evolution, and our relationship to spirit, or whatever you want to call it, to whatever we hold as sacred. So I'm starting at the intrapsychic, not because I'm saying it's not a causal relationship. It's actually a spiral, and every level has feeds back and is part of causing every other, one of the feeds back and is part of creating this whole. So spiral would be a more accurate map, but I'm using the concentric circles as a way of organizing the spheres I want to talk about. And I'm starting from the inside, not because I think it's the fundamental cause. I think the macrocosm creates the microcosm, just as the microcosm creates the macrocosm. But I'm starting there Well, maybe I'm starting there because I'm a psychotherapist, but I'm actually starting there because my interest in, the paradigm could be called anything, not anything, but it could. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can maybe read my notes. It could be called the paradigm of patriarchy. It could be called the paradigm of imperialism or of empire. It could be called the paradigm of racism, of dominance, of corporate capitalism, of multinational capitalism, which is now called the New World Order. So that, or anyway, there's many ways to name or describe it. I chose narcissism as the word to try and talk about all those things. Well, I imagine everyone can sort of guess why.
Well,
and it has, huh?
I would add to that, its opposite is that it's the age of disconnection.
Yeah. And so, if we're saying belonging is the cure, then you could call it disbelonging.
Yeah.
But it's not just this belonging, it's this belonging in service of some form, I think, of entrenched power and oppression. All right, so basically I chose narcissism because of he who shall not be named, because of our living in the realm of the narcissist in chief. And I think it's hard to talk about him in a way because we're really tired of giving him an undeserved level of bandwidth and constant level of undeserved attention. And we don't really want to co-sign what is the narcissist's core belief, which is that everything is about him. And so in giving him all that bandwidth, the fear is that we're just co-signing that notion. And we can't think or talk about anything but Trump. Maybe that's changing a little bit, But I also think he's a fabulous lesson for us. I don't think Trump became president because history was asleep at the wheel and made a boo-boo. I think he became president because in some way he's the perfect president for our culture and a perfect character and a perfect way to look at exactly what we got wrong. So Trump will not learn anything from his experience, but we can. Trump is a good example of narcissism writ large, and we can actually get our little revenge because while he won't learn anything from the Trump experience, we can. So that's why I'm starting with that. We were sitting around the Christmas time around the dining table, and I made a reference to some expression that some ancestor whose name I don't know and whatever, that got passed down. And so I said, isn't it interesting that we have these little expressions that we use in our family? We don't even know who started them or where they come from. And my son said, well, what do you think you will be remembered for? And I said, well, that seems to me I should ask you that. And he said, well, I think what I'll remember is your expression, another fucking growth experience. And and I realized that I was very pleased with that. And the fucking is very important because this is not to say, oh, everything happens for a reason. And it's not that at all. It's just, it happens. And your option is to learn from it or not. So I say that as a context for learning, our opportunity to learn from the national Trump experience. Trump told us everything that so I don't want to get endless. I mean, you could talk about examples and then just go crazy, but just a couple of real simple ones. He told us everything we need to know about him when he pointed his, hold on, where? I hope he did a better job of pointing than I am. Pointed his finger at us like a gun and said that he could shoot anyone on Broadway and no one would mind. He wouldn't lose a single follower. So if you break that down, he told us, one, it's all about him, right? We're not worried about the guy who got shot. Two, he would have no consequences. Everybody would just go, oh, good shot. So there are no consequences for his actions. So one, everything is about him. Two, because the other doesn't count, there's no feedback or no consequences for his actions. In short, he's basically immune from the law of consequences. And if you imagine yourself immune from the law of consequences, you of course cannot learn. Just two tiny examples, just two fairly arbitrary examples. Well, one was, I remember he was sitting with the CDC, standing with the CDC people, and he was saying he didn't want to let all these people who had AIDS, this is early in the thing, who had COVID off a ship, because if they came off the ship, they would land in the US and that would put the numbers up, and he doesn't look good to have the numbers up. And I was going, I could imagine someone thinking that in their deepest, darkest heart, but to say it to the public in front of the cringing, but trying not to show it, CDC big shots, to say that, the lack of consciousness it takes that you can say that and no one's going to be appalled. So that's just one little example. And of course, the ultimate thing of narcissism is that he cannot lose. He cannot lose. He could never lose. And obviously he didn't lose because Trump doesn't lose. So now it's hard not to notice, by the way, that pattern that pattern of everything is about us. Look at on the species level, that on the cultural level, that pattern of everything is about us. Effective our behavior on the other doesn't matter, and therefore we are exempt from the consequences of our actions, is a pretty good model of how we've acted, how we act on the economic, social, and ecological level. So that's why I think narcissism is is a good way to sort of grok that mindset. Let me have a quick note. Put my notes here. Missed something. I guess that's what I wanted to say there. So the most important thing to know about narcissism is not loving yourself too much. Narcissism is not someone who loves themselves too much. Narcissism is someone who has a shaky and empty inner self and who holds up a picture of themselves for others to look at in order to feel safe, and who substitutes getting people to bow down to or applaud or respond to the picture he's holding up for a genuine, authentic inner sense of self, inner sense of being. Now, there's degrees of that, and there's levels of narcissism that we all have, and that are well in the normal range. But with Trump, we're talking about a hugely damaged human being. So I'm going to go now to development, psychological development, child development, as a way of understanding how narcissists get created. First thing to understand is that the human brain is not an object, but a living thing, and it gets built. It gets built in the course of our lives, and it gets built and grows in the course of our early development, which means that as we have certain experiences, the neuronal pathways that mark that experience, that are our trail to that experience, grow and get strong. And the experiences we don't have, we don't grow the neuronal networks that we need to access those experiences. So the most basic existential decision we make as soon as we hit the air, maybe before, is to kind of decide whether we and the world are going to get along. And we form that opinion or habit or pattern based on the level of our nurture and the attention to our needs that our environment provides. Now, as a child, as an infant, of course, you can't say, my needs are fine, but my parents don't seem to know how to meet them, but that's not my fault. There's nothing wrong with my need. You know, there isn't that distinction between your needs and whether the world is meeting them. It's one thing. And if it's not being met, then your needs are not okay, and the world is not okay, and you and the world cannot get along, don't have a relationship that supports your existence. So that happens a bunch of ways, including that when you cry, someone comes and tries to do something about it. That when you smile, someone smiles back at you. That when you're cold, someone makes you warm. The gaze, the mutual gaze, which is what wakes up, we'll talk more about this at some point, the mirror neurons, which are basically our neurons for empathy, our neurons for being able to read and relate to and resonate with another being. Those get grown and supported. With every experience like that, we strengthen the neural networks that support connection and relationship. Even the imperfectness of those, since we all live in an imperfect world, is important. So it's not that when the baby cries, you know, the parent may change the diaper, but that wasn't the issue. Actually, the kid's hungry or the kid's cold. So the kid it's not helpful, unfortunately, not possible for the kid to learn that the universe will absolutely immediately rock and take care of all of his needs. But what they can learn is to have a trust that someone's trying, and to a belief that it can tolerate discomfort because in some way there will be a response to it. So the overall message of a well-nurtured childhood is, I'm okay and the world is okay and we can get along. Now the then there's the neural plasticity of the brain, which means that pro-social neural pathways get grown and strengthened and fortified, and there's more of them, and they get myelinated, which is a way of protecting those pathways and making them more permanent. Those get built by positive and nurturing interactions. If you don't get them, you will not have developed the ability to connect to someone else or to feel connected to someone else. So it's kind of like a well-worn path in the forest, you know. If the more it gets trod, the more the path can be found and gone to again. Part of neural plasticity is also that unused pathways can atrophy, right? That's the use it or lose it principle. And that the brain also prunes redundant neural pathways. Part of the housekeeping of the brain is a myelinating of the well-used, of the pathways that are seen to be important because they're well used, and a pruning of neglected pathways. One of the kind of tragic lessons about this came with orphans. I think they were in Romania or Albania, I'm not sure. After the Second World War, they had so many orphans that they had these orphanages, and in those orphanages, they basically they were just warehoused. And it turns out that those kids came out with a flat affect and unable to relate and connect. Because if when you smile, no one smiles back, why smile? If you cry and no one attends or cares, why cry? So, yeah. And some of the, now the other thing is the fact that none of us got everything we could have gotten when we were developing. But the fact, it's a little like language. So there's a certain period up to 3 years old where you can learn 4 languages for free, no problem. Because your brain is saying, oh, time to learn languages. Now, if you're an adult and you want to learn a language, you still can, but it ain't for free. It'll just take a lot more work. So some of these things can be repaired, but you're doing makeup work for the fact that you didn't get the help and the resources that you needed the first time around. Okay. My next page of notes here. This has been a problem with in school with teachers who are trying to work with kids, with traumatized kids, because they offer social rewards. If you do this, then you'll get praise. If you do, you'll get noticed, you'll get appreciated, you'll get a good grade, you'll be liked, you'll be popular, but the teacher will approve of you. But if you haven't developed the basic apparatus or interest in, if you didn't grow up with the unconscious notion that relationship is something of use. If you cut off relationship as something because it was nothing good in it for you, then it's very hard. You're almost immune to social rewards. So that's something that teachers working with traumatized kids, and I don't mean that this is hopeless and can't be dealt with, but that's one of the issues. Now, in healthy development, basically all of one's, and none of us had this perfect, all of our emotions and feelings and experiences and responses are witnessed and responded to. And in every family, there will be aspects of our behavior and our feelings that are not welcomed very much. And that will vary from family to family. So for instance, you could have a family in which one thing we absolutely never do is get angry. We just don't do that. We're not like that. You will grow up having repressed your anger. You will grow up with little access to your anger and not knowing how to express anger in a positive way. So mostly you will try not to be angry, and probably you'll explode when you can't help it, but you will not have learned to be effectively or to accept your own anger and to integrate it into your emotional repertoire. Alternatively, if you grew up in a family, hold on a second. Yeah, if you grew up in a family where one thing we don't do in this family is cry and whine and complain and be vulnerable. We don't do that in this family. We can yell and scream, but we do not get hurt, and we're not vulnerable. Then you will have cut off your access to your own hurt and vulnerability. And whenever that comes up, you will tell yourself, I don't know, it can't hurt me. And so your hurt will become an unintegrated, your ability to be vulnerable and be hurt will become an unintegrated part of yourself. Good therapy is essentially a rediscovery and a reintegration of our neglected, unaccepted, and atrophied parts. And part of how that happens is that at some point, and usually this happens when the therapist makes a quotes mistake, the client will get angry or be hurt. And at that point, they expect that they've just done something terrible for which they'll be rejected. And then, so the opportunity there is for the healing experience where the therapist says, you seem to be angry or hurt. And the therapist witnesses it with acceptance. So the client has the experience of being accepted in their unacceptable part, being witnessed and unaccepted, because the therapist is not gagging or throwing up or furious or disgusted. And it's really good for the therapist at that point to say, what's it like for you that you're being, I know you grew up, it's supposed to be angry, and here you're being angry and you're doing it and you're being witnessed in being angry. What's that like for you? So the client actually he not only gets witnessed, but he witnesses himself being witnessed. And that serves to help with the healing and the integration. So healing is the reclaiming of our unintegrated parts, and therefore a move towards personal wholeness and authenticity. Now, in the extreme, now I'm going to go back to the kind of extreme narcissism that happened to Trump. There's been books about his childhood and all this stuff, and I actually have not really read them. I've just know little about them, but without knowing anything about his childhood, just looking at any therapist, looking at him can tell you the things I'm going to tell you about his childhood, because they're absolutely generic to that level of narcissism. In extreme narcissism, the forbidden part is not just ignored or disapproved of. The forbidden part has been annihilated. The forbidden part got such an annihilating rejection from the parent figure that it's a life and death issue. You must not. So, for instance, if you have to be strong and better, more powerful than everyone else, and not weak and not a loser, which was clearly the case with Trump, the part of you that is weak or scared, or that is a loser, that could lose, that's vulnerable, becomes annihilated. You will kill it, because to show it is to suffer a devastating, life-threatening, psyche-threatening attack from the parent. Now, the problem is if you kill your emotional self, a part, you can't just say, I'm going to never feel sad, but boy, am I going to feel love and joy. I'm never going to feel angry, but boy, I'm going to feel lots of peace and connection. If you kill your emotional self, you kill your emotional self, all of it. That's maybe a little extreme, but so in that process, in the extreme process, what happens is the person has killed off their emotional core, or if you want to call it that, you could say their connection to their emotional core, their access to their emotional core. And what they have is that they have a vast emptiness inside. And that means, if you imagine what it's like to have we all have some of this, but to have a total emptiness inside, to have no place to go to inside, to have no moral compass inside, to have no point of reference, to have no emotional home in yourself. You're actually living in repressed terror. Of course, you can't feel terror because you're too big and strong to feel terror, but what's denied is a fundamental existential terror. And the extreme narcissist's solution to that is to hold up a picture of themselves, and they're holding it up for their life. My life depends on holding up this picture and convincing the world that that's who I am. And instead of having an internal sense of reference, I basically, the only way I know who I am is my reviews, is by people accepting, bowing down to, adulating, voting for my image of myself, my picture. It's sort of the Oz thing, right? My picture of myself. It's kind of, it's sort of the opposite. You know, there's this thing, the emperor has no clothes. This is like the clothes have no emperor. There's no one inside. So a little more about attachment. There's sort of three main ways of attachment. Attachment meaning the child-parent relationship, child-nurturer relationship. One, there's secure attachment, which essentially means that basically you're all right and you're treated with kindness and as though you were all right. There is extreme abusive attachment, in which case essentially the only defense is to completely detach. Every time I look at dad, talk to dad, he looks at me, I get beat. So I'm going to do everything I can to not be seen and to not be acknowledged and not acknowledge him. There's nothing good to be gotten there. But one of the most harmful attachments is what's called insecure attachment. And that's what Trump had, and that's what causes narcissism. It's because you are desperate for this approval, and you are in terror of the disapproval. So you're always on a knife edge. And you're on the knife edge because the source of your approval is also the source of your of the threat to your existence. It's the same person. And so your whole life is based around desperately trying to win that approval and desperately trying to avoid the disapproval. And this starts young, so at a power relationship where you have really no way to defend yourself. And so that's what builds a narcissist. So there's been so much talk about Trump lying. And I want to say that's not actually true. Trump does not lie. Trump is delusional. He has to believe what he has to believe to hold his picture of himself up. He's compulsed to believe it because he cannot tolerate that anything of that that his picture might be false. So an obvious example of that is he cannot lose. Long before the contest, you have to make it clear that if the other side wins, they'll be cheating. And after the contest, he simply cannot countenance losing, because that is to be utterly destroyed. There's nothing else of him but either a winner or a loser. There's nothing to fall back on. We all lose, we all have setbacks, and we find something in ourselves to fall back on, some fundamental acceptance or experience of who we are that helps us get through and to heal from our defeats and to be resilient. And at this point at this age in my life, I kind of have come to believe that resilience is pretty much the only quality that really counts. And so we see that with Trump. Every relationship is about asserting his dominance. Big me, little you. Because to not be dominant is to be at the mercy of the other's wrath. Just as to not please dad is threatening to your very existence. But inside is a desperate, lonely, empty, rageful, delusional man with no moral compass to return to, and an empty shell. Now, everyone can choose to have empathy for that or not. On the level of Trump, I leave empathy for better human beings than me. But it's nevertheless oh, it's also, you notice that Trump cannot not respond to a criticism. He cannot, even from the lowliest person. You know, you'd think his status would protect him, but if the janitor says something then he's threatened. So whatever someone attacks him, he has to respond. And then he was told, "You seem thin-skinned," and of course he said, "No, I have the thickest skin of anyone on the planet." Now, let's shift a little bit. Well, the next place to go here is what kind of, how does this personality enthrall their followers? And I have a little something to say about that, and I could say that, or we could, I don't know, put your hands up if you want me to go on and say that before we turn to discussion. Well, okay. So the mystery is this phony, transparent windbag who cares about nothing but himself. How does anyone imagine that this person cares about them or their kind, much less is their savior? Right? This is a long discussion, and we can have a whole class on this. Maybe that would be good, maybe towards the end. But the short version is this. What the followers get is, one, they're offered the opportunity to bask and participate in the glory of the person they're following. And we are all, and what I think is that because the society does not offer us much opportunity to be healthily empowered and part of something. And this is part, I think I said this before. I believe, and we'll talk more about this also when we talk about evolution, I think we are healthy and happy and have a deep need to feel that we are significant and empowered and respected parts of a meaningful whole that's worthy of our allegiance and that is in some ways sacred. Now, I use that phrase again because I've thought a lot about the words in that. I think we have a need and an instinct to be empowered and respected parts, members of a meaningful whole that is worthy of our allegiance and in some way sacred. And to the extent that this society does not easily offer that to us, and particularly, I think, has not offered this to the people who are most vulnerable to Trump, they are left extremely vulnerable to essentially faux belonging, to faux greatness, faux empowerment, and faux membership, faux belonging. So for those who haven't been offered that, you're offered a belonging, and you're offered a belonging that allows you to participate in the glory of the leader. Because you don't have a model, haven't been offered and haven't learned a model of of non-narcissistic empowerment, of healthy empowerment, you're either unempowered or you're superpowered. So Trump looks like he's a model of what it would be to be empowered, and you get to be empowered by being one of his followers. And this is very much to understand that. And this is, I also, as a therapist, have worked with a lot of people who've had to organize their lives around abusive narcissists in their families, especially abused women. And what you got here, the reason the followers are exactly under the spell of insecure attachment, just as Trump was developmentally. That is, you can be glorious and part of something wonderful and great as long as you follow him, and you can be expelled and destroyed at any sign by failing any loyalty test. So you have this uneasy attachment to something that gives you some sense of meaning and purpose and power in your life. But it comes at the cost of giving up your ability to use your own separate judgment. And one of the things that's obvious in that is how Trump utterly destroys, even his vice president, utterly does, and his attorney general. You cannot be a underling of a sycophant of Trump without at some point not failing a loyalty test and being brutally expelled and becoming an enemy. And he will organize himself around punishing you. Right now, he's spending all of his time trying to punish those Republicans that don't agree that he won the election. All right. That's the end of my rapping. And I'd love to invite conversation about it. You don't need to be called on to speak out, but putting up your hand as a signal to me or others that you have something to say, that's useful. I'm not going to treat it as a waiting line to talk though. But let me check the chat, see what's on there. Scott said, well, you can all read this. Scott says, while I despise Trump and his actions, I'm thinking that the fabric that weaves us together was torn long, but yes, before this guy showed up to torment those of us who value environmental caretaking, blah, blah, blah. I'm struggling with the usefulness of this hyper focus on Trump's personality and followers. Well, that's a good point. And what I meant to say was that focusing on him, and we'll be done with that after this, I think, is just a way to see on the psychological level writ large a problem that permeates us at a whole lot of levels. And that it's not, the point is, which is what you're saying, I think here, that it's not an accident that Trump got to be president. It's because it's a reflection of the world we've built on all of the levels here that you're talking about, on the environmental and multicultural and so forth. So I think I agree with that point.
I took a class, oh, hello?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I can.
I took a class that one time, and in that class, it was around the medicine wheel. It was a Native American class. Anyways, they talked about the Great Smoking Mirror in that class. And the Great Smoking Mirror is when we are triggered, or some high emotion is evoked in us, it would be good to look at that as the great smoking mirror, as a reflection of something within ourselves. Otherwise, we wouldn't have that kind of a trigger. So I'm just reiterating, Bob, what you said, that Trump wasn't elected by accident. He is a reflection of the United States. He's a reflection of humanity and how we have treated, as in a very narcissistic way, the gifts of this planet that were given to us for us to be good stewards of, and we haven't been. And all of our relationships. He is the reflection, the great smoking mirror of what you're talking about, that narcissistic paradigm that exists within our country, and I believe in many other countries as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with that. I'm not going to raise my hand. I'm just going to say some of my very favorite people in the world are Republicans. And unfortunately, in the last 50 years, what's happened to a huge percentage of especially men in our society is they've been disenfranchised from what they were raised to feel entitled to. And there's a lot of anger out there. And we can't take it personally because it's definitely what has happened. And so it's kind of like, unfortunately, I feel like it's left them feeling like he's the only person who's hearing them.
Right.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. Also, once it gets started, I spent some time in Wyoming and Idaho this summer. And I think for those people who feel very out of the corridors of power and disempowered, those people, I mean, it's a vast generation, but for a lot of rural Idahoans and Wyomingans, it was, they were standing up, they thought they were standing up for their culture. That voting for Trump meant our culture, our ways still count. So it was an allegiance to some sort of cultural unity. How the hell they thought this billionaire from New York, was the thing to rally around is another question. But anyway, so I'm just agreeing with what people are saying.
Well, they're tired of the status quo, and understandably so, because realistically, what they don't understand is it's about the people with the money that are shafting everybody.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Right.
And they don't understand that actually the Democratic Party is much more on their side than the Republicans are. That's my opinion. So.
Yeah. Although,
yeah. Anyway.
Although historically,
I didn't
barely,
know this class was going to be about that, but cool.
Yeah.
I liked what Leslie said when she said that these men grew up believing, because they were taught what they thought they deserved, and they've been disenfranchised from that. And so they've lost their sense of belonging because there is a movement to move away from the patriarchy and all of that. And I like that.
I just feel like, I mean, in some ways things are obviously getting better for women and minorities and so forth, but there's got to be a way we can do that without stripping men of their power, because that's bad for everyone.
Yeah.
And but I don't know what the answer is. So it's interesting though to think about. Come on, fellas, speak up. You must have an opinion.
Whoa, it sounds like she's daring us or something here.
Anyway, I came in late. I apologize. I still work.
Well, there were
full-time and-
marvelous things said by men in this group before you came, just so you know, but.
Oh, good. I came in late, so I
Yeah.
apologize.
I don't think that I don't think society, well, they are trying to strip certain men of certain powers, but I think it's all driven by, Leslie, you touched upon this as well, money. Money is the driving force, and up till now, men have made the most money. That's changing. Women are going to have, they're going to be better educated. I mean, that's going to take time, but it is, it's changing. But if the money is the power, I don't think it has to do with men or women. I think it's money. Just my
Right.
opinion.
Yeah, I would agree, Rita. I think, Trump and all the narcissism conversation, unfortunately became a sideshow to what has permeated this country for eons, and that is males' need for power and their greedy nature, whether it's killing the native human beings or killing the native animals or whatever it is. I just, I don't mean to suggest I'm not disheartened by recent political events, but I'm more concerned about our long-lasting events, and that is our striving towards our greediness and our striving towards power, primarily at the hands of men. And that's, to me, that's what has torn the fabric of our world. And I'm not sure that focusing on Trump and his narcissism is dealing with a long-standing, more global problem.
Well, one of the things I'm thinking is that if you want to say, the harm we've done, let's say, it could be mapped as patriarchy, men over women. It could be mapped by economic class, rich and powerful over poor. It can be mapped by race, white over Native Americans, for instance. It can be mapped numerous ways. And what I think is that those are all useful ways to map understanding one thing, which is what we got wrong. And but for instance, let's say you map it as patriarchy. Well, then if you map it economically, how many men have really been economically exploited and crushed and killed by the existing system and sent to war and to kill for the powers that be. So whatever. So I think all those ways of mapping it are useful, and but I kind of like the idea that we need a map that includes all of those spheres, and each one, if you make it a polarity, men versus women, then you could say, well, men have fucked it up, so we get rid of men, we'll be okay. Well, white people have messed it up, so if we get rid of white people, it'll be okay, or blah blah blah. So whereas dealing with that polarity is men becoming wholer and becoming empowered in a way that is not contradictory to the needs of the whole, or whatever, just as an example. Same thing with,
But see, that's how the wealthy win, is they
Yep.
keep us at odds with
Right.
others, minorities, men against women. It's all a game they play, and Trump,
Yep. So
you know, is a-
one of the
is a master-
easiest way to, let's say, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people that voted for Trump voted for Obama, and a lot of them would have voted for Bernie. So I probably agree with most of them about the ways that things are screwed up. The difference is who or what do you blame, if you want to put it that way. Which is to say, what's the solution? And one of the things that's really interesting is if any ideology or point of view that blames the way things are to some group that has the least power in making things the way they are and that benefits least from the way they are, boy, that smells funny, right? So how could all the things that, say, rural Idaho and white males are suffering economically, how could all of that be the result of immigrants or gay people or some of the people who have the least influence on shaping it? And why is that anger not going to the heights of the economic system? That's really what's excluding them. So that, so those divisions are in the interest of and cultivated by entrenched power. It's how it stays entrenched. I think in the Middle Ages, and this is a funny way to say this, but can you imagine the Middle Ages if you said, you know what, we're not going to have kings anymore. We're going to, I'm sorry, I'm just reading this note that came up. We're not going to have kings anymore. You know what? We're going to choose our own leaders and we're going to vote. Would one have believed hearing that? How much entrenched power and injustice and inequality there still is in a democracy. So, well, my God, how in a place where we vote, our leaders supposedly, does power keep itself? Do we have the kind of just for one example, wealth inequality that we have? So we'll talk more about that. We're going to talk about the economic realm and the political realm and so forth as we move on. Give me a second to collect myself here. Oh, there's a chat. So what's a literarian paradigm? Oh, literateness, I guess, huh? Right. Whoops. All right. I would like to shift. This class is trying to offer an intellectual framework, and it's also trying to offer some experiential stuff. So I would like to shift to, let me just see, do we need a break before we do that? Push the hand button if you need a break. Anyone, you have veto. Anyone who puts the hand up, we'll take a 5-minute break or 7-minute break.
Do you need a break?
Thank you.
You can have one if you need one.
I don't have to pretend to be serving the public on that. I will take thank you. I'll take a 3-minute break, but really just 3 minutes. You can all just hang and chat with each other if you want.
So what did I miss? Can anyone hear me?
I can hear you. Uh-huh.
What did
Um,
I came in late. What's happening? He's talking about Trump and what happened before that.
My sense is it started there and was still there when you arrived.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Greetings. I am broken. Braked. I got to get my picture up bigger. There we go. Okay. So this exercise is kind of a little exploration, and it's in relationship to what we've said about narcissism. The healing of narcissism is developing a relationship and an attentiveness to one's genuine, authentic core. That concept can be intimidating because, we probably rarely have this authentic, I just don't want to build this up as some magical big thing, but to know what's going on inside you and to feel it and experience yourself, your living self, to have an authentic self and to have access to it is the cure for narcissism. In development, there's a notion of refueling. Refueling is, there's the toddler who gets held by the mom and breastfed or just loved and held emotionally, and gets nourished. And then in a healthy relationship, the toddler then goes off and has adventures and plays and is doing great things. And then all of a sudden the toddler goes like, "Whoa, wait a minute, where's mom?" And runs back to mom and gets refueled. So refueling is a way of talking about, 1 second, I gotta do something here. Refueling is a way of talking about having a home, going back to mama, having a home to come to, having some place to go to that is home and that is nourishing and fueling, and that is a way of going back to mama, to the source, to spirit, to the life force, to the cosmos, to whatever holds and nourishes you. So I'm proposing checking in with life as it manifests in your internal experience of yourself as the place to cultivate as our central home that can fuel us in negotiating life. The stings and arrows of outrageous fortune. So I'm going to lead a little meditation. Just get comfortable. There's no special way you need to sit or do anything. You don't have to do this or that or turn 3 times, or just be comfortable. And meditation in my sense of the way I'm thinking of it, is just choosing to focus your attention, choosing what to focus your attention on. So what we're going to do here is take a break from the part of us that is planning or worrying or judging or making our lists of things to do. We're going to thank that part. Thank you. We need you. We'll be back. But right now, we're going to take a vacation from you, and you can take a vacation from us. Because we're choosing right now just to experience our livingness as our inner experience as a living organism. So if you want, you can close your eyes and pay attention to every sensation that lets you know that you are not a beautiful marble statue or a marble statue of you. You are actually a living, breathing organism. If you woke up in this world and knew nothing else, how would you know that you were a living thing? How would you know that right now, in this moment, in your experience of your body? You may feel energy or tingling. You may feel it in your hands. You may feel it in some other part of your body. You may feel it throughout your body. The life energy that you're experiencing now, that no one can tell you what it is, it may be very quiet. You may have to listen very closely, as though you were finding a little spring in the desert or a tiny little sprout in the desert. You may have to get very quiet to offer it your attention. You may be experiencing life yourself as a storm, a powerful storm raging through your body. You may experience it generalized throughout your body. You may experience it in some part of your body. You may experience it as a pain or a discomfort. But whatever it is, offer this experience your loving attention, because your attention is your power to integrate and to heal and to include and to be nourished by what you experience. And what you are experiencing is not some fancy woo-woo concept. You're experiencing the literal experience of yourself as a living organism. There is a campfire burning in the mitochondria of every one of your cells. There are rivers and streams and tiny rivulets of blood and other fluids bringing nourishment to every cell, to every campfire, and removing the waste from every campfire. There are electrical storms that are coursing through the infinitely complex network of neural network that reaches every tiny corner of your body. There are winds and storms of hormones as part of the lymphatic system's way of flooding your body with hormones. There is always the thudding drumbeat of your beating heart, like a drumbeat in the forest or in the jungle, that underlies and promotes and is a condition of your living existence. So when you check in with yourself in this way, what you are doing is experiencing how life is manifesting itself in you at this moment. At this moment. And that may shift and change as you offer it your attention. And your attention itself may shift that experience. But this is, in the most literal sense, the way the life force is manifesting itself in you. This is the aspect of the life force that it is that's entrusted to you to nourish and care for and grow, but also that's offered to you to be nourished by the source. And so your connection to this in yourself is also, to life inside you, is also your connection to life and the source all around you. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and let us all sink into that experience, whatever it is for us. And when you're ready in your own time, not yet, when you're ready in your own time, come very slowly back into the room. Start with a soft focus and let yourself slowly come into the room and notice whatever is around you. So it may be outside of a window, it may be a tree, it may be something dear to you in your home. And let the life in you be transparent to and resonate with the life outside and around you. And let you experience a communion that transcends your skin-tight self. And that is essentially your membership in life. And when you're ready, also that was part of opening your eyes also. When you're ready, look around and join this wonderful company that you're in. You didn't have to look far for something dear to you, right? If you want to talk, whoever wants to talk should unmute themselves. No one's muted by me. If you're muted, it's on your machine. Now, when you're guiding a meditation, since the purpose of the meditation is for the people to be in touch with themselves, you kind of hope that whatever you're offering is more helpful than a hindrance to it. And you have to trust the people to ignore whatever you say that just doesn't fit or is getting in the way. and to use whatever's helpful.
It made me stop coughing.
Maybe you can market that, the magical cough cure.
I don't think we can bottle you though, can we?
I don't know. Hmm. Well, maybe we're all speechless. Maybe that's a good place to be, or maybe someone wants to share a little something, what that was like for you.
My friends and family who are believers of metaphysical principles, New Ageists, if you will, whatever descriptor, whatever category they fall in, they would tell me that this transformation that you spoke of in your course description and the OLLI booklet, the transformation has begun. That recent political upheaval in this country has shaken the earth to its core, has shaken the energy fields to its core, and that the transformation has begun. Now, while that sounds, it sounds encouraging to me, it's just so intangible that I don't know what to do with that, other than hope that it's true. I think that this exercise you conducted in meditation and self-awareness. I think if there'd be some way you could freeze humanity for a couple moments and take a big bucket of liquid and pour it over the earth, and would cause everybody to stop for a moment and try to get in touch that way. That maybe that would be, I guess in my hopefulness, that would be what it's going to take. Short of that, my friends simply say to me, create as much positive energy force as you can as one person. Put it out there, and let it build from there. The transformation is underway. It's not. That's what they say. I'm yeah. It's not very gratifying though. I want to do something. I want something to happen.
I'm not familiar with that. Can you elaborate on what you're talking? What transformation? About the end of times or something?
Sorry, say that again, Leslie.
Are you talking about the end of times?
No, I don't think the end of time. But the I don't know that I can articulate it very well. But an end to this self-serving, greedy, power-driven society that we have, humanity that we have. That there is an undercurrent, a growing undercurrent of folks who are more in touch with themselves and trying to be good citizens of the earth. And
I hope that's true.
well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I speak so haltingly because that's about all it is for me is hope. I mean, it's nothing to grab onto and do other than, you know, yeah. I guess my point was, I'm encouraged to think that some believe there is a transformation already in place.
Well, I mean,
I'll
they're
do one.
concrete leads if you just talk about civil rights movement or the women's movement or stuff like that. It's not, there's some ways that spiritual people talk about that where it sounds like that would be happening in some spiritual realm that's somehow separate from our embodied lives. And then it becomes sort of some notion or faith you're supposed to hold or be buoyed by. But I think if you integrate the fact that, I mean, the insight from that is that the whole is mysterious and that we are in some way, we face something when we want to make change, we are in pain about our relative powerlessness. And so that there has to be something underneath that some power greater than us that we can ride. I kind of lost where I was going with this thought, but I think integrating it, you know, that the spirit is making some big transition, and hey, look, we're taking care of the homeless here. Those aren't two separate things, and what we can do and what the larger world is needing to have happen are part of the same thing. But I don't think you can care deeply about something without having some level of pain about, my relative powerlessness. And then so then it's what do we have faith in, if you want to call it that, you know? So go ahead, Robert.
Well, I think the problem comes down to a ship like the Queen Mary. You try and turn it around, it takes a couple tugboats. To try and steer that thing in harbor is very difficult. And we have a culture that's like the Queen Mary. We're trying to turn it around and shift it in a new direction. And it's not going to turn it around in a day, or maybe even in a year, although the scientists are telling us we have about 10 years before there's no ship to turn around for humanity. And I think that we do have the power to start to make the connection with our world and with nature. Because we are energy beings ourselves, we can also project energy, and we can project it from several different states of being. At the level of the heart is one. And my way of doing that is at Grace with Meals, to become focused in my heart, put that energy out through my hands and feel my breath with the plants, feel my energy going out to the plants in a loving way, feeling it coming in and feeling the difference that air that I take in has when I make that connection. And then hands out again in loving appreciation to the people who grow my plants, and feel that energy going back and forth until I can feel a connection, definite heart-to-heart connection with them. And then putting that energy into my food so that it elevates that food up a different level. Because one of the problems, and I agree with everybody who's been speaking, there is this problem. We are out of balance. We are disconnected. But so much of the movies on the problems that we have don't give us solutions to what we need to do. I think the solutions are on multiple levels. There's a level of what we do in our environment, the levels of what we do in our communities, and what we do in our families, and what we do as ourselves. One of the problems that I see is I eat everything organic, but it's all in plastic packages that I have to throw away after one use because they're not recycled here. So the problems are immense, but I do believe that starting to become connected into our universe of realizing that we are divine beings, that we are part of the earth, we are dirt, we are earth, we are all of it. It has to come in an experiential way beyond thought. thinking is really important, but not going to be the answer. The other thing that I would mention
Robert,
is what Ken Wilber,
we're getting a little, uh, uh, we're getting a little short on time, John. Just want to say that.
okay, I'll make it very quick. Ken Wilber has pointed out that we all go through development when we're born, and we can get stuck at levels. And Mr. Trump is stuck at a very early level of his life. Change is not going to be a simple thing. That's all I'll say. But it is makeable, doable, because we have to.
Okay, people can stay later if they want, but I'm gonna just wind this up a little bit. One of the things that maybe this little community can offer each other is for people to find their way that suits them. And some people's way of doing that may be more spiritual and ephemeral. Other people's ways of doing that may be much more nuts and bolts. Some people may feel like they need to do something clearly nuts and bolts to feel that they're being part of this. So it's a chance for everyone to, so Scott, in your case, I think exploring what it is for you that makes you feel you're doing what you can, and finding that, and God knows, what that needs to be. And whatever it is, it won't be adequate in the sense that you won't think that you're turning the ship, but whatever makes you feel you're using yourself well, using, your experience and your accumulated wisdom and your talents and your interests, And so for all of us, I'm hoping finding some home in this transition that fits for us. And that makes us feel like we're in some sort of meaningful membership at the same time that we have room for our hope and our despair and our grief and our anger and yeah, something like that. So, yeah. So, man, I really appreciate everybody's, Scott, I really appreciate your, you're putting, I don't know what you put now. And everybody's talking and everybody's presence. So I'm inclined to end this meeting. Anybody have something they want to say before that? And next week we are, go ahead.
See you next week.
See you next week. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Okay, Bob, thank you.
Bye-bye.